how nonprofits are using Drupal. And we're going to focus more from a bit of a focus on how to communicate with nonprofits about Drupal, especially because the share of Drupal use has gone down as Drupal complexity, the migration out of Drupal 7, I think we know that, but there's still a lot of value in some case studies that make it a really, really great choice. So who am I? I'm Gena Dellett. I've been using Drupal as an end user since 2010, first at a regional medical center where we, had a hospital website, managing a hospital website. And then since 2015, I've been on the agency side, working with nonprofits now over the last 10 years, supporting their Drupal systems. And so how can we start? I quoted some things that came out of yesterday. Who in the room was at the summit yesterday? Yeah, a couple people. And so one of the things that came out of the talk yesterday is what people don't say. The keynote by Jessica was talking about higher ed and civic trust and the role of the web. And she talked about what people don't say is that this website is amazing and I trust you with my future, thinking about higher education, that that's not a result of a website. But every time somebody visits your website, you do have an ability to build trust, that these spaces matter. And what trust means. So this is a picture of my grandma. Welcome to my presentation. This is my grandma, Eula May Akers. She had the gift of hospitality. She had the saying of never return a dish empty, which basically resulted in her having bakery battles with a neighbor when that either gets like competitive and you never return your dish empty, or you just lose your dishes because they're never returned to you. But a point that was also made yesterday is that all of the color choices, the taxonomy structure, all of the decisions that we make on the websites that we support and build, and the way that we can guide our clients in making thoughtful decisions, all of those are acts of hospitality. And that was another thing that Jessica talked about in her keynote yesterday. And the way that we sort of protect and honor the hospitality of what these systems are that we're creating is through governance, a governance structure for how the system is maintained, who works on it, the protocols for that, who has access. And I liked that connection. So yesterday when she was talking, I was thinking about my grandma and what it meant to be in a trusted, supported space, right? To be in her home. And I don't think it's a big leap, and it's not, because it was, that connection was made yesterday, that we're all in that work in this room. We do what I think of as meaning-making spaces. So that's how I think about my work with organizations, is that how do we make meaning in the world? We go online and we try to educate ourselves. We access resources. We have questions. We try to talk that out with somebody else. Maybe that's in an online forum or a group. We're making meaning of the world, and we do that within specific sectors and topics. And that's what nonprofits are doing. They're ushering and protecting a certain frame of interaction and betterment in the world in a lot of ways. And the way they do that is by sharing resources and having hubs of communication and having ways that you can take action to engage in what you're doing. So technology at the core, when we think about it for nonprofits, and especially for Drupal, why is there a big value for Drupal in this work, is because it is a fantastic platform for meaning-making spaces, for what it means and the way I think about how we process through and understand individually in order to participate collectively in work. Drupal is really great at that. Drupal is also great where organizations can stay more independent. If I get really bad at answering my email, or my team all of a sudden starts to suck, that's okay, because the things that we have spent and the investment we've made in a site can still be protected, because that nonprofit can find another organization. And that's a really good value for nonprofits when they invest in technology, that they don't have to restart or rebuild just because maybe contracts terms change or there's a misalignment in key points of contact between people. We can protect that relationship. And I think on the agency side, that's something to take really serious, to embrace that when you're working in Drupal, to embrace that choice that the organizations you work with have, and really earn it. And earn it by giving options, by talking about why decision points matter and all of that. And then the other thing that I know as someone who did not start at all on the technology side and now knows a lot of ways to break tools, Systems are learnable. Drupal is learnable. And if someone has the interest and the skill set and desire to read documentation, watch training videos, sit through a call with folks to learn a resource, they can maintain and evolve their site by themselves in a way. And that's a really big value, especially with larger organizations, the in-house resources that can exist to manage and support a system in concert with a trusted partner. I like to think about Drupal as that it's built for change too. So the example being if you want to just divide a room, a bead curtain could work. It divides a room, but you can also walk through a bead curtain wall. It's different than a concrete wall. It's flexible, and so that's something that's nice about architecture. If you know that there might be a lot of changes in the future. There's some benefit to that if there's an ability to kind of walk through a wall still. But, I can't see the couch, and that was my goal. I didn't want to see the couch right now. Well, we can change that in the future. So with even your architectural decisions and recommendations you're making for organizations, are they coming from the standpoint of it's fine if it's more of a bead curtain, which can be flexible, and also don't lean against it like you will fall to the ground, but or does it need to be a concrete wall? And Drupal, the flexibility that it has architecturally to make changes in the number of options that exist is significant. We think a lot about planning for long-term sustainability with all the organizations we work with, and that's taking seriously decisions we make now and the impact that has in the future. And that means that even from a technology recommendation standpoint, if Drupal is a good fit for the mission and really the staff and budget capacity. So it can be a risk factor if there's just one person within an organization that happens to be really excited about a particular technology. I always think of that should be considered more of a risk than necessarily a win in technology decisions, because that puts a lot of responsibility on that individual's shoulders. And, if they decide to get another job one day, who else is going to take on that work, or what is uniquely held? So the whole thing of governance, how decisions are made, understanding the culture of how an organization is working, some of the political dynamics is really, really critical to technology and underpins really any Drupal system within any institution, but I think especially within nonprofits. And that includes, planning for ownership, planning for handoffs, having training resources. How we think of it, our training resources that we produce for our clients, they don't live in squares, Google folders. They live and are owned by the client. Or Drupal happens to be a content management system. You can also create a content type called documentation that is restricted to a specific user role and upload specific kinds of training resources and how-tos to the website so they live within the system that they're about, and because of the access permission controls can then be made available to staff, to content managers, to whatever the role is, so they live within the system. So there's all kinds of ways that when you think about planning for ownership and handoff in the future, you can work in a way that even if it's a long-term relationship with an organization, you can have that built in the documentation, the training resources that you provide from the very beginning. So you are always earning that relationship. You're not keeping someone captive because you uniquely know Drupal and only you can support them with their system. Highlighted roles and permissions there. That's always a fun thing. I shouldn't say fun, but it is classic of it. It matters most when the thing happens, a nonprofit accidentally, someone was excited that they could push a button and then they did, and then it turns out that had consequences. And the way that you can create roles and keep people in their lanes, it's such a simple, out-of-the-box way that Drupal works, but the power that has for the organizations that we work with in a really basic structural way to keep people focused on what they need to do and not distract above is significant. So we're going to look at two quick little case studies. I contained it instead of having, because then we could just spend the rest of the time looking at specific websites. But the point of this is to try to have a higher level. Why do these things matter? Especially what is Drupal good at and what's the value behind that? So then we are reminded about that to infuse some of these reminders into how we communicate with nonprofits. If they can understand the value of their technology, then that makes them feel better about any investment of either money or time that they're putting into their technology. So connecting the practicality of how we spend our day with the value that that, that we should be getting from that time. So the first organization is a small nonprofit called Godly Play, and they make meaning through story, wonder, and play. They have a little Drupal site, and the key thing that they really like, which is so simple, but I just wanted to share anyways, they just love their resource directory. It's just a bunch of content types that have categories and a tagging structure and an ability to search, and the way that they were sharing information in the past was not centralized, and it is. It's just a content type, with some fields that they can add, or members when they log into the community that they can add. But the resource directory for them has been really significant in the way they talked about self-service access to information. So doing this presentation was a great excuse for me to just reach out to clients and not make assumptions about what I think they should like about their site. But hey, if you could brag or say something that you're proud of about your site, and then to get answers back and hear what they say, right? So for this organization, just having a great resource directory that's easy to maintain, that they've already thought through the structure of what needs to be included within all of the content, they can manage it, or their community members can add to it, which also can then amplify the amount that one organization can put out in the world, when that doesn't mean they have to be doing as much content creation as before, because it's a hub that there can be additions in from the outside. The second organization we'll take a look at is an organization called Beyond Benign, and they put together the Green Chemistry Teaching and Learning Community. So this is a system that's been around just for a couple years. And in that short amount of time, it already has over 3,000 users from 100 different countries. And so it's a unique platform, and then it provides educational resources for educators K through higher ed on green chemistry education and curriculum. And so it's a unique space that allows for the sharing of submitted or uploaded teaching curriculum that someone might be using today within the classroom, as well as links to resources that exist externally from this community, but all searchable within one hub. And that was something that they had identified, Beyond Benign had identified as an organization that just didn't exist in the world. And so we went through a careful process in the beginning of just why did we even go with Drupal as a solution for this? And thinking about that meaning-making space, as I defined early, like what does it mean to have a hub for that? And that's really what they needed. They needed to support both open collaboration of a community, and so everything that you can see and do without having to log in, as well as a little bit extra either access or a little bit extra reporting of, now I'm going to track that you downloaded this resource because you're logged in, and I need that data for my grant submissions or whatever that might look like. They also needed to control a significant level of access requirements and sensitivity because of the number of different groups and forums that they manage within the community, and wanting to keep that as a place where you're balancing that healthy tension between making it easy for people to get started, but also those people having confidence and security that they are in a safe, maintained spot in order to participate fully. And that's a balance, because you can't have everything open in order to achieve the kind of trust that somebody needs to have when they're participating at that level. They also have a lot of care and thought that goes into their moderation workflow. So these are academics, especially engineers, thinking of the process of what it means to say that this is a best practice, and not only the best practice, but this is how we're going to educate folks about best practices. There's a very thoughtful and careful peer review process that they have for resources that are submitted online. And Drupal is really, really good at that, having workflows for content submission, having it in different states, the way it can trigger and be within a feed for people to review and see, the next step that needs to be taken on the information. So this is a screenshot from one of their groups. The site uses groups and forums heavily. There's quite a bit of customization within the groups module as well, which is another great thing of what you can do with Drupal. There's a module for just about everything. And if you're dissatisfied with what you get in that module, you can add the little bit of extra that you need in order to meet the functionality that's required. So in this, it's important for them to note who created the group, because they have a structure that community members with proper access can also create groups. Who are the moderators moderators of these spaces are important and critical to them making it something that people feel is secure, and that their participation matters and code of conducts are enforced. And so having that front and center is important. And then just the number of resources and exchanges that happen in these places. Before, there was not a hub for this. The kind of interaction that now the GCTLC can have used to only happen at a conference. And now, because conferences are, difficult when this was born during a time of COVID, and the lack of resources, if we really want to have a bigger impact of getting certain types of curriculum within a broader range of educational organizations, a website is really great at that. A website can replace what in some ways used to be connections if you happen to buy a plane ticket and schedule yourself to be out of office. Now that can happen within an online hub. So they have a bunch of different group types. You can see, I'm not going to go through all of this, right? It just means that roles matter in the site. Drupal's really good at that for roles, whether that's a simple thing from just more content management or that kind of the engagement hubs that websites can represent. And especially with groups and forums, the way that those restrictions can be for at what level in the system can you operate? Can you create spaces for others? Can you moderate spaces? Can you just participate in spaces? Can you view what's happening but not comment? Any level of what that user story can be controlled with permission and control. This is another interesting thing that is also a great thing. Drupal is really an integration platform. There's a quote that I think I have in a later slide of a unnamed person. They have a name. I just didn't catch it yesterday. About what they said about what keeps them in the Drupal community. But one of the things when users submit, because they can submit what GCTLC, what they call learning objects, is that there's another platform, kind of a sister platform that we also built to support called Green Chemistry for Sustainability, which is a partnership between Yale and the American Chemical Society. And so there's a Apache Solar Index that actually connects certain content of these two websites together because they, for funding reasons and organizational reasons, they wanted to have their own hub, but they recognized that there was sort of a Venn diagram overlap of, well, you have this content, but we kind of want that content over here. But we're not going to just replicate that. And so just build a bridge between, right? So then you can have organizations can be the experts or the kind of the hub for what they do best and what their focus is. That doesn't mean that you can't have the discoverability across multiple systems. The technology is absolutely there to do that. And so to have a connection between and a simple opt-in for when someone is submitting, do you want this to be searchable on this other spot too? Yes or no, and then from that it can become searchable and findable in both places. That again expands both organizations' ability to serve up the resources that when people are on their site, what they need. Why did they come visit in the first place? This is a long quote from Dr. Jonathan Moyer, who is the director of Beyond Benign, but I wanted to just put in the whole thing because since this was a system that did not exist before, and they specifically wanted it because they had identified a gap in the world that was missing, the thing that could fix that and resolve that gap was a website. The impact of that is important to share. So the main things being the ability to house both original content, and he noted the importance of peer-reviewed and downloadable files, and also link to external resources. So again, it's pretty simple, but the point of this session is to remember the value behind some of the tools and technologies that we take for granted, because as whether we're the developers or project managers or business analysts within these type of projects, if we can hold on to and connect to why this stuff matters, the simplicity of a pin, some cool module, some great customization, all of those things then make more sense when we're proposing them as a solution or we're completing implementation. This is we're going to look at some specific tools. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old. You probably can't read these speech bubbles. This is a shout out to Aaron Reynolds, who's the writer of the Cave Boy Dave book series. If you know, it's very funny. This poor little cave boy, he's trying to invent a fork. He comes up with 4 if he hasn't gotten quite there. And his dad just isn't buying it. He's just not understanding because his dad is like, now I have to carry 2 things to my mouth, like your invention and the food. I have all these fingers. And he says, what does he say, little cave boy Dave? He says, but can't they just make life better instead of easier? So what makes our life better? and that's what I think about with tools. And so I'm going to share some tools as we all now think about Kate Boyd Dave and his invention of the fourth, of what my team, so I asked my team of technical project managers, what are the tools in Drupal that they like the best on behalf of the nonprofits we work with. So this is what they came up with. Some of the things are just features in core. The ability to link between nodes, that's really significant for organizations. The meta tag module and then taxonomy, two of those things are just core features of Drupal, but why they matter. So an example, this is the International Mountain Bicycle Association. They've really changed from being more focused on supporting chapters, the individual mountain biking chapters around the United States, to be more about trail town development and infrastructure and advocacy with federal government to support multi-state trail systems and land use agreements. And so the folks that they used to come to different meetups and trainings that they had were more bikers, and now it's city planners that they're engaging with more. So as an organization, they've really evolved of what does it mean to build more trails close to home, as their mission says. And one of the ways they do that is via resource sharing on their website to make it easier for city planners and to take action within their locale. And the way that they do that is linking between the different content types that they have. So on a structural day-to-day basis for their managers, that's a straightforward thing that again helps with discoverability and connects a call to action with maybe an advocacy post because of a bill that's up for debate that you can take action on and say that you support this cause. So from a content management structure, that's very easy to do within Drupal. And that's because of entity reference to have nodes related together. So a simple, again, out of the box thing. Some other favorite tools. This is actually great timing. Jacob Rockowitz is here today at 3 p.m. He'll be giving a back to basics web form module for Drupal presentation using AI. Is his talk at 3 p.m. We love anything web form. I'll say in my my baby days when I was just learning Drupal, that was what I was most proud of first. I could build a web form, and I think it was like maybe at this point a year ago, but someone was having problems with their web form and I still fixed it. Conditional logic, validation rules, all that good stuff. So there's some great, both the web form module, which is maintained by Jacob Rockowitz. There's also web form content creator. So that's the ability to use a web form and then create a node out of that, which there can be a lot of reason and value of the experience or other information that you want to collect from the submitter that isn't relevant to the content itself, but still have a clean workflow that then can also feed into different moderation states because it becomes a node. So the way that you can piece those together is really valuable. There's also, if folks are in this room are familiar with CiviCRM, it's a totally different software, but it integrates really nicely with Drupal in the Power. So the best thing, especially related to web form, is web form CiviCRM. So that means that your fields within your web form are actually directly updating your contact data within the system. Just a quick about Civi, if folks haven't heard about it, because I do think it works so well with Drupal. It's full-fledged CRM system that can do all the CRM stuff. It's an all-in-one kind of product, meaning it's not going to be the best at donation management or the best at events, etc. But it's all in one place and the value that you get from that. Relevant is another Drupal module, which is the CiviCRM entity module. So if you're a Drupal developer, it basically means that you can do a lot of CiviCRM stuff, but do it the Drupal way, because all of that CiviCRM data can be accessed as true Drupal entities. So some good things to take a look at if you haven't heard before about web form, rah. And I'm excited about the 3 p.m. talk to see what he's going to share. Some other features that the team came up with is, again, roles and access permission, groups and forms. We talked about dashboards. Dashboards are great. And what are dashboards built out of? A lot of views. Mostly a lot of views and blocks and ability to change fields in views and access in views. So you can have one system, and when somebody with this role logs in, they see this on /user. If somebody else with a different role logs in, they see something slightly different. So that ability to rearrange, create dashboards, stack them all together from a site building standpoint is fantastic. That another thing that stuck out to my team is that we are motivated to have our clients be as equipped as possible for the range of what it is appropriate for them to know about their technology, because they ask us more interesting questions and we like more interesting questions. And so we're motivated to train our clients well. And that's what's fun to then see people who aren't developers or didn't start maybe at their organization a few years ago as somebody who was a technical site builder or something. With some training and support, they can all of a sudden make really powerful and useful changes within their system in a trusted way. And because of Config Tracker, you can see in case there's a mess up and you can revert and change. So Config Tracker is really important, and it gives, as my team said, peace of mind. Gives peace of mind. And everything that we can do with customization. I'm sure there's a lot of great sessions today that talk about all the hardcore ways that Drupal can be really fun, but it goes without saying of the bottom point of another bit of flexibility. A lot of things at the top, though, are a value standpoint for why organizations should feel really good about any of their investment, both time and money, with their technology, and that's in Drupal. My favorite too, because of the pressures of my day, I create content sometimes and I want to do that as quickly as possible. And so what tools do I use to do that as quickly as possible? I clone nodes, which is an easy, really simple module. And you also can, the section library module is great, where if you're using Layout Builder and you have sections that you've created, shout out to the talk yesterday for those in the room or anybody listening to this recording. There was a talk at the Higher Ed Summit yesterday about single directory components in Storybook. We really liked Storybook and the single directory components, and we use Layout Builder with what we do. And so my ability to then save multiple sections that I've created for one page into a library to then easily reuse all of that on another page and just change the content, that is really helps with my efficiency to have then my site look consistent, and also frankly minimizes the amount of time I have to spend in order to get a great dynamic page up. So these are two just simple modules that make a big difference when I think about when I log into the site and want to make an update. So Drupal is a platform, not just a website. This was a key part of a talk yesterday, and this is a quote from Gabi Play, the director of operations, that we talked a little bit about earlier. And she from her quote, she understands that it is a platform. It's not just a website. And that's reflected in her identifying that being able to bring in a bunch of different stuff together. They have their CRM system connected into their website as well. So it's integrated, has streamlined their customer service function. So has made things better, made things more efficient. They feel more supported, like they can work better as a team because of what their technology has brought to the table. This is a screenshot from Georgie Cohen's talk yesterday. She talked about the value of systems thinking, and I really liked this visual, and this is useful too whether we're starting out in a new conversation with a nonprofit about whatever their technology needs are and planning that, or we're doing a quarterly check-in, or they have some tiny new feature they want to add or some new big feature. How does that change relate to all of the different points? Because there's some amount of relevance that hits on any change within the system. She defined systems thinking as holistic, analytical, abstract, conceptual, and relationship oriented. This was the quote that I heard yesterday from someone that I liked, that I didn't catch their name. So they're an attendee from the Higher Ed Summit, is who said this, that they really love Drupal because they've learned to use so many other tools through the platform. And I hadn't heard of it in that way before, but that's because it's a platform. It's not just a website. The integrations and connections mean that we can all end up being open to many more things than maybe what we thought the start of the project was going to be. So in this next bit of time, we'll be looking at what it means to work with developers and vendors. And that's because healthy partnerships are healthy platforms. Relationship advice, it matters. Be constructively dissatisfied with your relationships with your partners. This is a quote from one of my technical project managers, Mark Armstrong. And I liked the way he put it, because there are so many options in Drupal. it's kind of overwhelming, but that's actually what makes an argument for why choosing the right vendor really does matter, because there are a lot of ways to do the same thing, but there's pros and cons about what some of those choices are. Not all modules are actually maintained anymore. Not all modules kind of connect in the way that you think they do by the overview page when you're going to download it. And so being able to work with someone that can help you find the right fit among a sea of options is of great value. And so that's what we're doing if we're working with nonprofits in support of their technology. We're helping them responsibly wade through their options and give them the pros and cons. So finding the right fit, these are just, thoughts on what should either we as vendors have in mind to have as a gut check for ourselves of how are we responding to each of these questions and needs if they do or don't come up. And for nonprofits, these are considerations to have in mind when either you're starting on a new project for the first time, or you are looking for different support in support of existing technology. One of the things I think about is just not settling. So my sister, closest in age, she's a nurse, and one thing that she was told by a professor in nursing school back when she was in college was, don't settle. If you don't like being a OBGYN nurse, then go be a different kind of nurse. Go work in the emergency room. If you don't like emergency room nurse, go be, a home healthcare nurse. Like, there's so many different ways to be a nurse. There's also so many different vendors in the world that are fantastic at Drupal. And so if you have concerns about the contract model or the support structure or whatever it is, that's okay, because your technology doesn't have to be at risk because of that. And you can find a vendor that's a good fit. So learning about how much experience do they have in Drupal, the services they offer, examples of previous work, what do their clients say about them, how do you communicate with them, are there expectations around that, what's their team structure, is there a specific type of organization that they have excellent experience at working with? Are you kind of within that type of organization? Do you represent a different type of organization from that? And one of my favorites to talk about in conversations is the breakup clause. If this doesn't go well, how can you get out of it? And that goes for both sides, because sometimes, both parties might want to break up. Like, I might want to break up, or they might want to break up, and we need to have that in writing. So all of these things are a good thing to look through, whatever side of the table you're on, whether you're evaluating your own contracts that you share with nonprofits, or if you're a nonprofit evaluating your options to be best supported. So we'll take a look at maintaining and growing your site. I am not a gardener. I like to think that it would be cool if people thought I could grow food. Like, I don't know what vibe I would need to give off to do that, but to be someone that's like, yeah, I could grow food. But I can't. These are alfalfa sprouts. That's about as much gardening as I do. It's a 7-day turnaround. And even then, sometimes I forget the rinse cycle that you have to do on a daily basis. And then there's a house plant, which we also don't have. We have a crochet cactus in my house. Well, those two things require a different approach. One is a really quick turnaround, and then you don't have any more alfalfa sprouts. And another, you have to pay a little bit of attention to it all the time for a house plant to exist in your house. Websites are not alfalfa sprouts, okay? If they are treated like alfalfa sprouts, it'll go poorly. So it is a house plant. You need to care for it. You don't have to spend every moment of the day with your house plant, but there has to be a little bit of love to it. And so that's what maintaining and growing your site is. This is a living, breathing thing. Expect that there's going to be money that has to be spent on it. There's going to be time that you have to invest in it. And it's kind of like plants. So a key takeaway with the maintaining and growing of your site is what I tell organizations we work with, or whether I'm talking to a new organization, is read your contract. Especially for nonprofits, it's most likely that not all of that maintenance of the system is going to be on them internally. They are working with a vendor, and having people remind themselves about what the terms are of their agreements, especially if they're looking at a change. I always encourage organizations to understand contracts, because you want to avoid the potential that you're double paying for services. So if you have to give 6 months notice, but you're wanting to launch in 2 months, maybe you have 4 months of double payment of some sort of thing. Well, just from a financial standing purpose, it makes more sense to plan these things out by understanding the terms of your agreement. So Always read the fine print, which is not like a thrilling thing to say, right? It feels a little boring, but I feel like it's very important for if we are going to be responsible and supportive of the nonprofit community and the way that they can best support their technology. That goes into kind of the pricing structure, all the different ways that organizations can work in support of technology, because again, the ongoing maintenance and work of a Drupal website is most often not fully maintained in-house. They are working with a vendor to do that, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. And every agency is going to have a slightly different approach, and that's great because one approach may be a better fit for one organization than another. And so having that match the way a nonprofit does their decision making, their communication norms, how important authority is for the way decisions get made, all of those things can be tied to the way an agency will have its pricing structure. There's a few other things for consideration. Is there emergency rates, add-ons, how are add-ons charged? Just all things relating to pricing structure. The main thing of working with agencies and ongoing, to give a shout out to Hermione Granger, played by dear Emma Watson, who was a graduate of Brown University. Way to take it, Providence. Good job. Is be constructively opinionated. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa. I mean, she was great. She kind of, she could get annoying at times, but people really counted her. She saved the day. She saved, Ron and Harry many times. So be constructively opinionated. If you want something different in your site, if you want better training, if you're confused about the term of your agreements, if you see a warning about something being unsecure, a security notice in your site when you log in for the first time on Monday morning after a weekend, say something, in general. And on the agency side, if you're working in a website and you see some significant changes because, it's your client's site and they can make certain changes on their own, but you have questions about it, you can also ask. So be constructively opinionated. We're supporting the nonprofit community and the work of nonprofits by the way that we care for and pay attention to all the details of technology. And that's that meaning making space. So if you have questions, I have an email address. So that is me. It's mycompany.com. If you scan that, that'll be linked in. But we have about 10 minutes for questions before we head to other sessions. So I give it to the room. Thanks for coming.
I can attribute the quote to one Mark Felton.
Oh, okay. The person who attended the summit. Thank you. Who said this to me yesterday? By a person.
On an early slide, you had a bottom bullet point, engaging stakeholders early to prevent scope creep. And in my experience, I am a huge advocate of bringing in the people who are going to use the tool while you're building it so they can ask thoughtful questions. But earlier I bring them in almost every case, the greater my scope creep is going to be. So I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah. Well, the way I think the way we would approach that is write everything down.
Yeah.
Is write everything down. So all the considerations that somebody might have, whether it's a key board member and they're really excited about a project, and maybe they're even funding part of a project uniquely, is if you write everything down that people say, one, that shows that they were heard and taken seriously because it was written down. It also gives an ability for you to then prioritize your list. This is not a bulleted list. This is a numbered list. There is a distinction. Even if they show up in a flow, one is more important than two, which is more important than three. And so if you have truly collected everything and you have that agreement with your clients that we are working based on priority and the level of effort that those priorities take, level of effort can also mean that priorities shift. So there's kind of the teeter-totter, then that has to be done and balanced together, is write it down. And then I would say give the work back. So if, as on the agency side, if you take on too much ownership, that's almost you doing the scope creep of saying, well, now we can do this. It's more writing it down and then giving the work back to the client to say, okay, we've said all of these things could be possible in the system, but you need to say what you really want it to do. And then that's what we're going to deliver. So there's a healthy tension there. but documenting. That's even a trick that we'll use internally. If we can tell that we have internally, one of our developers has all these considerations that we know may not be relevant to the end result, we still write them down because it's been collected, it's been noted, and maybe we'll end up with a "I told you so" in the future. Like, well, I guess that point, J mattered more than what we realized. Yeah.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
Can I share a story
Please.
similar to
Yes.
that? I don't want to dominate the. Anyway, very early on in my Drupal career, like my first major independent Drupal site at a small company I was working for, I was working with a senior developer who is entirely remote. Before that was common, and he didn't like interfacing with clients, and so I had to write everything down because I went to those meetings for him. The project was extremely underbid for what we had to deliver, and I think we went like 430 hours over a 480-hour project.
Yeah.
And at the end, my HR department said, "How did this happen? How did you like double this?" And I said, "Well, we built everything I wrote down, and I attached all of the diagrams I had drawn from all of those meetings." And I said, "We built this," and then they changed their mind. And then we built this, and then they changed their mind. And HR was like, "This is a really long paragraph." And CC the senior developer and said, "Do you want to chime in here? Like, this is a junior developer who said is justifying all this." And his response was one sentence: "No, Nate's got this covered. He did exactly what he just said." And yeah, it saved our butts. We like didn't get sued because I had written
Everything down. Write it down. Yeah.
And I left that company like the next immediately.
I mean, the other thing that I would just
No,
say.
we were so underbid. I don't think he asked for coverage.
Yeah.
He threw us under the bus, and that's why I left the company.
Yeah, the thing there too that I hear you pointing out is just the value of time. I think as tools have gotten just cooler, like just better tools all the time that help with efficiency, but then there's this pressure on time of I can manage more by myself than what I could 3 years ago. I know that as a practical thing from my experience during the day. But the pressure on time also means we need to respect and give it to each other. And I think that there's a lot of yesterday, the focus on so much of the role of governance related to technology management. I really appreciated that fresh perspective, that it was a little bit of a flip. Sometimes at camps, there can be a lot of focus on the tool itself, the way the software has evolved and how much things are better. But all the governance behind how we make decisions, which is all the messiness between how humans communicate and the expectations we have of each other, that takes time. And there's not a lot of way to shorten that amount of time. That takes patience and us reflecting and giving that time to each other. So that's a key thing with working with nonprofits.
I think, to add to that, like and I can't say that we're great about doing this all the time, but that I would hope that it would happen more that when you're working with like external clients, as a consultant, not just within your own organization, that there is a point where you say, okay, this is what we're building. Like you sit down and you define, not only write it down, but say, this is the project and these are the requirements for the project. And you have signed off on this is what we are building. And now if you want to change that, this is now outside of the scope of the project. It is going to increase time. It is going to increase budget. So therefore, now we need to renegotiate, right? There should have been a red flag, HR. Why is HR the one picking up?
Yeah.
This is the problem.
Sounds like other issues in that specific situation.
Also, starting fundamentally underbid, we learned that our bid for that, like months later, was an order of magnitude less than the next lowest bid.
Yeah.
That's what you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
Which those are lessons you get to keep with you, right? I mean, harvest those. Now on the other side, there's a lot of learning there from every angle that you can
That's
look
not
at.
something a junior developer had any control over.
Yeah.
No, the senior
Yeah.
developer, some project manager should have been stepping in to handle
Yes.
that situation. We just had it recently happen, and it wasn't until, and then we were showing the project periodically, not directly me, but our marketing team. And now we get to the end and they're like, well, we want to, instead of building it inside this website, we want you to build it in a new website. It's like, no, way outside the scope of the project.
Yeah.
That means renegotiating and figuring everything out in a new timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But I think also, like you talked about scope creep or scope change, but sometimes it's just lack of understanding scope. I want an event to landing direction. That can be really simple. That can be ridiculously
Yes.
complex. So like defining the risk points and the complexity early on, is something that I think is so, whether it's an outside developer, Drupal or anything, it's like, what are the risk points that may not be clear across the people who you're working with? Because an event landing page can be a billion things, right? It could be the simple thing in the world, can be right out of the number.
Yeah, you could deliver an event landing page, it looks great, and like, but it doesn't work in the calendar. I wanted like also a little
Right, yeah.
card view for my event.
Yes,
and
which is
like,
a different.
But you asked for a landing page.
Yes.
Make a beautiful landing page.
Right.
That's an additional thing. But some people assume if you're creating an event, you get the event page and it fits in a card view. Those are two displays, two different designs,
Yeah.
different components.
Yeah, you have to have the right person defining the scope and asking the right question.
And a lot of times that's, if you're working with a vendor, sometimes that's, it doesn't get discussed in the initial sale, initial contract, because it just doesn't. You know, there's a lot of things that do, but a lot of things that don't. And defining them early on is so important. So you set expectations.
Yeah, I try to get a sense of who are the players, who's in this organization, how do decisions get made. That's some of my goals at the beginning before we even talk more about functionality. Who are the people, and what are kind of side comments of quiet frustrations that people have about each other within their organizations that I can pick up even within the first call, because those only get more magnified. If I sense any tension internally within an organization, you should just assume that there's actually a lot more. If that's what they're willing to share within a first meeting, there may be more behind that can then represent significant risks for the way a technology project would go. I think to the point of Drupal being more of a platform rather than just a website, and the thing of understanding scope and what that looks like, that applies whether it is just about Drupal or it's how decisions are made across all these other systems that are likely to some degree connected into what the website does and is. And then the different teams and departments that are more closely working in or managing those disparate systems that are communicating together. So a lot of this, and the purpose of this, is that it should apply. This is a Drupal camp, so it has to be about Drupal. But the point is that this should apply with the way that we are working and communicating in general, often internally as well as with organizations.